So as a consequence, nothing very much was done. And as a result, we had even law enforcement officers involved because nobody really cared about anything.
Especially in New York.
In New York, as a matter of fact, New York was so rife with officers being involved in 1970 after I had gone on to the Bureau of Narcotics and Dangerous Drugs because of my undercover prowess. I was selected to go back and work on a Governor Mayor Lenz's task force, which was
The NAP Commission, right?
NAP Commission, yes, and it was to work undercover on police officers in New York who were involved in the drug trade, those who was actually trafficking in drugs.
You worked there.
But at that time, I didn't go because I had, my wife was pregnant. But I know agents who went, one of the agents who went in my stead worked on a case that ended up in a movie called Batman and Robin. He worked on those two guys that they were two policemen who were very corrupt. And they had a movie about it called Batman and Robin were the main characters. But getting back to, in the early 70s, the white heroin was coming into the United States, and it was being shipped into the United States in cadavers. We had a major trafficker, two major traffickers involved. One was Leslie Atkins, and the other one was named was Herman Jackson. And reportedly, both had a club over in Thailand, in Bangkok, Thailand. But on one occasion, I was negotiating for a kilogram of white heroin up in, out of all places, Bakersfield, California. I went up to Bakersfield and I had had a wisdom tooth extracted, so I was in deep pain at the time. And I worked undercover and I ordered a kilogram of white heroin from a guy by the name of Eli Homer Hamilton. And he told me to stand by for a couple of days, so I stayed in the hotel for a couple of days. And of course, I had surveillance all over the place. And after 2 days arrived, he and his cohort delivered a kilogram of white heroin to me. And I thought it was a burn because it was almost like flour. And when I put it in the cobalt thiocyanate test tube, it immediately turned purple, which was an indication that it was heroin. And when we sent it to the lab, I was at my desk and I got a telephone call from the chemist telling me that it was 100% pure.
So there was a big, as the Vietnam War geared up, there was a big uptick in availability and quality of heroin.
Of heroin, this is true.
Can you say that in a sense?
When the Vietnam War was in progress, there was a big availability of heroin, white heroin that was purer than the heroin that was coming in from Europe and from Mexico. The heroin from Europe and Mexico generally had been diluted quite a bit. But in the Vietnam era, the heroin was coming over that was very, very pure. And one of the rock groups wrote a song called Chasing the Dragon. And not many people realized what they was talking about. And that was actually smoking white heroin on aluminum foil and inhaling it through a straw. And that's what is called smoking the dragon. And we started seeing people being killed because of the purity of the white heroin. But the Leslie Atkins and Herman Jackson, they were major violators out of North Carolina, and they were probably the predecessors to guys like Frank Matthews and the other major narcotic traffickers in the New York area.
Yeah, I met Ike Atkinson when he got in trouble in prison.
Who did?
Atkinson would have only done 9 years back in the 70s. He got 2 more conspiracy cases from inside prison. He was trying to do deals from in prison.
Right.
But he was living on his military thing. He did 20 years in the military.
And good pension, yeah.
Weird.
It is, it is not unusual for drug trafficking It's been my experience that drug trafficking is similar to drug addiction, is that the trafficker makes so much money and so easily with so little effort
Hard to stop.
that it's hard to stop. It's the same premise that happens in many of the neighborhoods throughout the United States. And I think we, even today, and I think we are at a loss, we are in denial that in the United States there's drugs all over the place. And I would postulate with a degree of certainty that many of the crimes that are committed in many of these cities are drug related, not necessarily over territories. Many of them are involves drugs that were shorted, drugs that were bad drugs. Even here in Little Rock, the guys are learning to burn people with a drug they call influx. It's something that looks like drugs. And this has been a trend that has happened for a long period of time. Even when I was out there working undercover, we had the traffickers to test your identity. Sometimes they would burn you the first time by giving you a bogus package to determine if the jump out guys, they would call the undercover surveillance agents, would arrest them. And some would sell bogus drugs for the money if they thought you were a novice. And so the federal law came around where they made it a federal law to sell something in lieu of
It was just like selling the real drugs.
the real drugs, right?
So now, now that there's always been conspiracy theories about drugs were purposely put to destroy certain groups, especially in the black community, and they were treated as kind of crazy conspiracy theories. But now in these last 10 years or so, we've had CIA release documents admitting that, oh well, we did help certain cocaine smugglers in the 80s. We did work with La Cosa Nostra after World War II to fight communism, and in return, we turn a blind eye to heroin. So, what do you worked for the government, and we now know that some of these conspiracy theories are at least partially true. What do you feel about, and then we also, we put so many people in prison because of drugs, mostly black males. You know, did the ends of slowing down drugs justify the means of putting millions of people in prison? And what do you think about the government's role in simultaneously fighting drugs with people like you, but at the other hand, they're the ones help bringing them in?
Well, actually, during the Reagan administration, this was very prolific. And the Contra support, there was a person under Reagan's administration who was a major cocaine trafficker. And I'm convinced that they sold drugs, specifically crack cocaine, and in the minority communities for monies to fund the countries. And I know that Maxine Waters had a hearing at one time probing that, and not much came out of it.
Then 10 years later, they kind of admitted it was true, but they let it die down.
They let it die down. But it's true that they did that. And I think some of the things that this particular agency did, if it were done by other agencies or employees, certainly they would be jailed. But we have to understand that in the United States, we have things that is called classified. When certain things are classified, secret, top secret, and beyond, like secret compartmental information, talent key, gamma, umbra. With those classification, federal law and federal procedures dictate that rather than get into these sensitive areas, that the courts and the prosecutors must not go forward with the case.